In the past, when countries have suffered with inflation, and what most people refer to as inflation is somewhat incorrect, they think about prices going up. That is a consequence of inflation. Inflation is when the government or a Federal Reserve System or central bank increases the money supply. But when the prices go up, the people respond and they say, there's not enough money. Even in this pseudo-deflationary period, we don't have deflation because the money supply is skyrocketing. It's just that there's deflation in the financial instruments because the stock values have gone down, the house values have gone down. But even under those conditions, the cry is always for there's not enough money. And what have we done? Essentially in these last 2 years, I mean, there was way too much inflation before that, and we have just literally pumped the money out there to try to hold this bubble together, but it's not put, and it hasn't come back. Now, this situation is very risky, not only financially for all of us. How do you survive when a financial system breaks down? How many people have lost in the stock market and the value of their houses? That is very dangerous. But the real reason that I get concerned about it is because of the economic chaos that generally comes with a financial crisis and a monetary crisis is the threat to our liberties. And that is what we should be concerned about. We want a sound monetary system, a sound economic system, because we want to protect every single one of us, our individual liberty. That is our goal. I am of the conviction that the dollar cannot be patched together again. They are frantically working on coming up with an international system. You know, in the old days, we used to hear talk and rumors of devaluations. When it was $35 an ounce, when are they going to devalue? And our government would incessantly deny there will not be a devaluation. It was a big event in 1971 when the dollar was devalued by 8%. It was devalued by changing the price of gold from 35 to 38. But it was always denial, always denial. And then later on, they went and made a significant denial from that there will not be any more devaluations, and they devalued from 38 and they took it up to $42. Now, of course, it floats and the price of gold floats. But now the denial is, when you hear it on the news tonight, they were ridiculing anybody who would suggest that there may be some international discussions going on with the banks about a new international currency. I believe they are doing it. And the more they deny it, the more you ought to be perking your heads up and paying attention, because we're probably getting closer to it. Now, the only thing that's keeping them from doing that is they're under the gun too. Because Mises taught that currencies can't be created out of thin air. If you just move onto an island and we decide, well, this is what we're going to use as money, and we'll print these pieces of paper, it never works. The only reason the dollar works, even though it's fiat money, is because it at one time was linked to gold, and that's how it came into existence. So they will have a lot of trouble having a new currency, even though I'm sure they are working diligently in doing that. But once again, this is an attack on us as a nation and us as a people, because you don't need a federal government, you don't need a Federal Reserve System, you don't need a U.S. Congress to have signed money. All you have to do is legalize the Constitution and allow gold and silver to be legal tender, and you don't need a Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve was brought into existence in 1913 because they said they needed a lender of last resort, and they needed a stable currency. So, but now I don't think it's a lender of last resort. I think it's become a spender of first resort. We talk about the hundreds of billions of dollars the Congress appropriates, and sometimes I just think that's a distraction, because the big event is occurring at the Federal Reserve System. this is where the power is. And this is where the control is, whether it's international, what they do, and it was described to you earlier, all those things that they do that we're not allowed to know anything about. So I now call the Federal Reserve System the fourth branch of government. It is essentially equivalent to, if not superior to, the other three branches. Now, it seems to be a hopeless task, but if we remember how the Federal Reserve came into existence, we should remember how we can get rid of it. It was done by a congressional act, and we can get rid of it by a congressional act, and we should.
Yeah!
Most people ask me, it makes so much sense. Most people understand it. You know, if you print a lot of money, it's going to lose its value. Why is it that the members of Congress and everybody goes along with this? And it's an interesting question because it's for different reasons. A lot of them never even thought about it, you know, and they were never taught about it. And during the bubble phase, they're not too worried about it because there's an appearance of wealth. But what they don't realize is that the wealth is based on really borrowed money and an illusion about the value of the currency. So the value of the house goes up, and they claim that's a lot of capital, which it is not. And stocks go up. They think they have a lot of wealth, which they do not, because that can be disappear rather quickly. So the Federal Reserve then has only about one thing to do. They have to keep the whole thing going over and over again. But the members of Congress are paying more attention, and that is good. But those who are in charge, those who are in leadership of Republicans and Democrats, I think they know generally what's going on. But there's only two groups that we have to worry about in Washington that want to continue this process, and that tends to be the liberals and the conservatives. But they get along quite well. They pretend not to get along, but they get along pretty well because liberals like to spend, for one thing, they like the welfare state, and the conservatives like it because they like the warfare state. So they get together and they compromise, and we have both. So now we suffer from the welfare warfare state, which is what we need to repeal.
Yes.